Welcome back to the top four counted for the semifinals here of the last NRG Series event of the year, this Pioneer 5K trial. I'm Dominic Stryker. I'm just hanging out. George Jabor, how we doing?
What's up, Tom? It's been a long day. It's been a long year for a lot of these competitors, and we have some really exciting matches here at the end of it. It's some really cool storylines here.
Right. One of my favorite parts of when you get to like sit down and watch the entirety of an NRG stream for a weekend or even for the day sometimes is the story that comes out of it. You're like, oh, I saw that player in this round. How are they doing? And then to see them like triumphantly come back at the end of a tournament, we're going to get that in spades. Not only are we going to feel that way for our feature match from earlier today, but I'm going to feel that way from watching the NRG series for months, even years at this point. We're going to watch two, darlings of the NRG series.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it is the memories that you make in these weekends. Aside from the money and the accolades and the hardware, it's just a great time, and it's something to look back on for many years.
Right. If we can pull up that top four bracket, we can kind of let you guys in on this left side, our feature match. Jesse Robkin on Blue White Control, Zoe Riederman, Boros Convoke, two well-known names on this series, two friends, two teammates. George, how's this matchup sound?
This sounds awesome. This is pretty fun. They're both very fun people. I'm very eager to see how they compete against each other here in this top four. It's a pretty even match. I don't think anyone's particularly favored. I'm not sure. I think Jesse's the higher seed, so will be on the play, which definitely favors her.
It looks like Zoe's our 5th seed and Jesse's our 8th seed. So the Convoke deck,
all right,
we get to play in game one.
Yep, that's huge. And yeah, let's looks like maybe the players are almost
while those
ready.
Players are getting all set up. We also have this right side. You just saw him this last round, Reed Anderson on this 4-color combo, the Geological Appraiser Discover combo, the last person championing this deck in this tournament, facing off against Julian on Abzan Greasefang. This is going to be two turn 3 decks kind of looking at each other, but Greasefang doesn't kill on its turn 3, whereas the combo deck will.
Yeah, I think Greasefang's got a couple of new tools in the most recent set. There's a kill spell that allows them to discard a card, Bitter Triumph. So there's definitely some interaction there. But in this whole top 4, even in the top 8, there was no Rakdos. There was no mono green. It feels like a completely different format.
It's got to be the emergence of this Discover deck. It's difficult for some of those old horses to try to keep up. So it's great to see we have the new deck here in this 4-color combo with Reed. But Julian having Abzan, a long-known Greasefang deck, the Blue Eye Control deck, and the Convoke deck, we're going to figure out, is it time for this brand new combo deck to shine? Or can these tried and true and even tried and true NRG players, can they all take it down? With this said, we could pop on down. Like I said, we're going to watch this left side match. This is Jesse Robkin on Blue Eye Control versus Zoe Riederman on Boros Convoke. Very importantly, playing for seed, always important. Zoe is the higher seed, means they have that choice of that play draw on the Boros Convoke deck.
And we did see Boros Convoke versus Blue White Control earlier in the feature match area. I can't remember who was it that ran away with it, if it was Zoe or if it was Ryan.
Your middle name is the Goose.
We've seen a lot of 4-color and blue white today. And importantly, Jesse's version, this was when we watched the Yorion version of this Azorius control deck. So we do have cards that will be very important in this matchup, such as our 4X temporary lockdown, but we need to find them in our 80-card Yorion deck.
And I remember it was Zoe who took that one down. We did talk about that. I think she won it almost in turns. And we'll get these names updated on the graphic shortly, and as well as the decks. But yeah, Zoe on the left playing Boros Convoke and Jesse on the right playing, well, Blue White Control. That one's accurate.
Okay. Right. I mean, this is going to be a great matchup of two friends with two incredible decks. Everyone strap in, lean back, get some snacks, get some water. We are here with Zoe's going to try to run over this Blue White Control deck before Jesse tries to just keep up and stabilize their game. One drop. This brand new, just incredibly powerful card out of Boros Convoke. If you're the Blue White Control player, are you any more or less scared of seeing the Warden versus all the stuff that makes tokens?
I'm on edge the entirety of this match until my opponent concedes.
Okay, so Blue White, it doesn't matter maybe that much which creature they're starting on, but maybe how they finish it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, anything can go. These early turns, anything can happen. And look, Zoe's off to that turn 1 drop seems so innocuous, and here we are with 5 creatures immediately and a 5-drop.
And the Loxodon, ever so important. We said this was a pivotal piece. You know, Jesse is on the hunt for early game temporary lockdown, so they can take care of a lot of these cards. But the Loxodon or any of the future 5-drops we play won't be swept up by that.
Yeah, I mean, look how lopsided the number of permanents are. I mean, it's 1 versus 7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh my goodness, Zoe! As Jesse's playing their second land on their second turn, the board's flooded.
Jesse's
look, it's hard for Zoe to tap.
6, 8, 10, 14 damage here. I think is about to come across.
Do you think this possible get lost on a single creature is gonna change a lot of that?
I don't know if get lost is enough. I don't know if a temporary lockdown is going to be enough. But, I mean, there are some ways for this to slip through Zoe's hand. And I think playing a 5-drop is probably a good way to start and ensure that you have some staying power.
We see our mana. Two important threats there being tapped. This is for the Knight Captain.
What a start. Look at that. I mean, just 1 drop into 5-drop into 5-drop.
Right. And we've used 2 creatures here. So if this resolves, we're going to be able to find 2 drops or less and still be able to rumble in combat with these goblins and this Loxodon we played last turn.
Yeah, Jesse's probably thinking, do I use a counterspell here and take a huge lump, or do I just let this resolve and use a removal spell on something that's going to attack me? She's between a rock and a hard place.
Right, it's harder because this is a threat that also gets 2 more threats into Zoe's hand.
I would just go to game 2. I would just...
Some people like really want the camera time. Some people just really don't want to play the slog that is some of these games. Sometimes when you're playing against Blue Eye Control, when you're playing with it, you can sometimes just feel when the game's over.
The advantage meter is 99-1, I think, at this point. It's going to require a very, godly sequence of events to happen here. Right. Some miraculous draws from Jesse's end, but
I think it would be great TV if Jesse climbs back into it. So I'm rooting for the figure it out plan. There's nothing cooler than seeing like skilled players figure out a way to like piece it all back together when it looked completely unwinnable.
Let's see what happens here. So we got a Thraben Inspector and a Resolute Reinforcements, it looks like.
Does, and here comes the combat. 3 goblins and our Loxodon. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That is half of Jesse Robkin's life total already.
So calculated by Zoe, saying if I swung out, it would be a 2-turn clock anyway. So let me use some of these creatures to put some back in my hand, and then my god,
here's the man of the sea, a desperation play.
Okay.
Jesse wasn't holding up interaction, wasn't holding up removal. Was, I assume, digging for a temporary lockdown. Did we find it? Do we have it? And we do. But we have 2 large threats. Field. We have 1 point short of lethal. If there's a Voldaren Epicure off the top here from Zoe, that could just be the game.
Oh, I don't think I did.
Here we go. Big draws coming in.
Because Omen draws, right? I can't miss that.
I think we're doing a quick check. I saw our judge peek in real quick.
Oh, maybe I think Jesse maybe forgot to draw for turn.
Drew off Omen and then to slam the lockdown.
Yeah.
That's all right. We're figuring it out. Much appreciated. Gives us more time to figure out Zoe's massive board. But Jesse did step 1, which was have that lockdown and clean up a lot of all those tiny pieces, a lot of those leftovers. Zoe is 1 point short of lethal. If you're Blue Eye Control, how you feeling?
Like I said, I would have been done with my mulligans for game 2 at this point.
It's hard, right?
Way. There's just no way.
This match is very important, right? That's one of the reasons to just stick in it, to remain a part of this game. It is every point, every match, every game, very important at this stage for people. And we see we're just going to quickly correct the board, say, right, make sure it's exactly the way that it was. Just clean it up fully for the folks so that they can check it out. As I said before, and as I will always say, judges are there to help. Judges are awesome, very knowledgeable, want to make sure that you get the best game, the best content that you possibly can. So whether you're a player, whether you're a viewer, big fan of judges all around every time. Yep, we can see we're just quickly checking everything.
You will draw your card for the turn, and we will have now arrived.
Returning it to right here, allowing Jesse to draw their card, maintain their game actions. I have a sinking suspicion it may look very familiar. And it's temporary lockdown. Close it up, toss them all away. Like we said, we're going to be left with this Venerated Loxodon and this Knight Captain. I think I'm on your school of thought at this point.
I've seen this one before. So
you've seen this one, huh?
I've seen this one before, yeah.
And the part that's the hardest is if you get back into it here, how are you going to get back into it next turn and the turn after that and the turn after that?
The thing is, Jesse knows there's a Resolute Reinforcement in Zoe's hand, which is a flash threat. And so if she's able to slam, Painless Land plus Supreme Verdict, you're still at 1 life. You're still dead.
Right, yeah. The flash threat also allows Zoe to play out the Inspector here and keep that 2 mana floating around. Maybe it's a clue. Maybe it's Resolute Reinforcement. It allows them these options in this aggressive deck. Jesse draws her next card and says, this one's not for me.
Yeah. Unfortunate, but it makes a lot of sense. I think that's exactly how we expected the game 1 to play out. Although it was very powerful, it was not maybe the average start from Boros Convoke, but it was Boros Convoke on the play versus Blue-White Yorion. That one I know that one well.
Right, so we're going to first take a look here at this Azorius control deck out of Jesse. Remember, this was a deck brought here this weekend to try to help fight back against the power that is the Appraiser decks. And we know that Jesse's playing an 80 card version. You said this helps like shore up if you have like red-black opponents and so forth.
Yeah, and it helps you out in the mirror as well because you have a little bit more staying power. You have the 4 deluges instead of the 3. You have typically 4 sharks, but here in this matchup, it's going to work to, I think, Jesse's disadvantage, where you are going to really want to find those temporary lockdowns on turn 3, the verdict on turn 4, which can happen. You just have less of a chance. But these Settle the Wreckages, I think, might catch Zoe off guard. And these Chromo Sea Sharks, these Boombringer Valkyries, they can all come in, but I still think Jesse's going to have her work cut out for her.
Right, yeah, as you're saying, Jesse's got some of these tools here, these 3 Chromo Seed Sharks, these 2 Boombringer Valkyries, these 2 Settle the Wreckage. We joked about it earlier, but it might come up and, not only is this open deck list, but these 2 are friends, compatriots, work together a lot, may have known that Jesse was on a Settle the Wreckage strategy here today. Alongside, remember, Yorion the Sky Nomad always hanging out if somehow this game goes real long.
Yeah, and now, like you said, it's open deck list, so Zoe's going to have to think about these Settle the Wreckages as soon as Jesse's got 4 mana. The thing about it is you can kind of sniff it out after a while. I think Zoe's smart enough to be able to play around it and know if Jesse's got it or not. But we might find some real blowout plays here in this next game.
And a part that's always difficult for me, it's easy to say what I want to bring in, but is there anything that you definitely don't want as your Azorius control here?
Yeah, I'm taking out like these Teferis. I'll probably take out that Narset. Maybe a Deluge. That Rewind can just go. You can rip it in half.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just all this clunk is really not what you want.
Great. So anything that's big, clunky, high mana, we want to get those out of here.
You don't need
bring
these
in all interaction.
You don't need the Rewind. You kind of need the deluges, but they're 4 mana. They don't do much. You could probably take out a couple of Typhoons. Yeah, you want to be as low to the ground as you can be.
If that's our plan, we'll have to also check out Zoe's deck and figure out just what they're going to be doing with this. They have their own sideboard as well, starting with these 4 Forge Devils, probably not for blue-white control matchup.
No.
These 3 wedding announcements. You said these were great before, and we saw it last time for them.
Yep. You're going to bring in the wedding announcements, the Redain, maybe the Get Lost. I'm not entirely sure exactly if you have enough stuff to board out. With a deck like Zoe's, you don't want to overly dilute it because you are trying to have a critical mass of creatures and play to the board and kill your opponent fast. But the wedding announcements and the Redain definitely go a really, really long way.
And we can't skip past the one of Kutzil's Flanker.
Yes,
a massive threat when Zoe played this earlier. Oh my goodness. Almost ended a game all by itself, right? This card cares about how many creatures you control that have left play this turn. So if they get swept up with a lockdown or a verdict, even Settle the Wreckage, they're still leaving. and this flanker could be a massive, massive threat to fight back.
Yeah, you could make a huge, 7 power, 8 power flash threat in response, or not in response, but in the aftermath of a Supreme Verdict, untap, and that could very well be lethal on its own.
And I think it's so hard when you look at this Boros Convoke deck. You were saying, right, you don't want to dilute a strategy. And this one is so set on doing the exact same plan over and over each time that they do so. So when you're thinking about bringing these couple of like powerful sideboard cards, it's hard to even think about what cards are the bad cards because they're all a part of the same engine.
Yeah, and I think one thing to talk about here as well is it's the end of a 8-round. It's towards the end of an
Oh,
8-round tournament, and Zoe's been playing an aggro deck all day, and Jesse's been playing a control deck all day.
Right. Zoe
Not
was
to
on
say one
I'll
is-
get lunch for you.
Yeah, not to say one's more difficult than the other, but one is more taxing and takes 50 minutes more often than 20 minutes. And at the end of a long tournament, I gotta say maybe Zoe has the upper hand just in terms of stamina, if not also the deck choice.
Yeah, I mean, a great point to bring up, right? Like all of it is an aspect of a tournament.
Yeah.
The fact that you're playing against someone you know and the banter's really good, maybe that lulls you into some nice confidence, or maybe you're comfortable and like you play even better. You know what your opponent is up to, or they've been having a long day, so maybe it's a little better to try to like sneak in a shot that maybe you wouldn't have tried before. All of it is a part of the experience, and that's how these like seasoned veteran players who we've seen and loved across the NRG series, making it here to this top 4 in our final event.
Yeah, maybe you just say, hey, you know what? Hey buddy, I don't think you have that settled wreckage. I don't respect you. I'm just gonna attack. I don't think you ever have it. I think you got nothing.
There's fun to it, right? I think it's we always get so wrapped up in like the difficulty of playing a tournament and grinding through and like winning everything. But as a lot of us who show up to the NRG tournaments, it's all about the gathering. So as I was saying right before we went live, if you're two friends like Zoe and Jesse, this is the second best spot to play against a friend of yours, the best one being the finals. So playing against someone who you like and enjoy and like want to play with brings that sense of enjoyment back to playing the game.
Yeah, no, it's a great time, and you get to trash talk maybe a little bit more than you do
Yes.
against a stranger.
I mean, you and I could talk. We played on camera, and
yeah,
it's right before they brought in these face cams, but we were shooting so many shots at each other.
Yeah,
you wouldn't believe it. I can't think of a better way to say it than like bringing the joy back to playing the game. If you've all been enjoying it, I'll say one last time, there's all the buttons. You could press them if you've been enjoying. Send some money your way. NRG really, really appreciates it. And there's no sign of stopping. 8 events next year, double qualifiers, champs at the end of that, champs even for this season coming soon. We're wrapping up a lot, but it's just going to keep going.
Yeah, and shout out to the production team behind the scenes working tirelessly, heroically,
to keep
absolutely, the stream going. Really just working miracles behind the scenes. So shout out to everybody behind there.
Yeah, and I mean, worst comes to worst, next season comes, we just play even more Magic. Standards coming on back, right?
I'm excited for that.
Right?
Are you gonna play standard? I think like the upcoming RCQ season might be standard, and I know like NRG announced yesterday that they're gonna be doing some standard in the upcoming NRG series. So I might have to put a deck together.
Hey, all I can say is I already own Shieldred, so that's half the battle.
That's like 80% of the financial battle, probably.
Right, and I mean, this brings me back to I just remembered being so excited about this top 8. I forgot that Red Black and Red Black Sack and Mono Green weren't even here.
Oh yeah, I mentioned that. I'm like, this is almost a completely different format. So playing standard will be very exciting again.
Right. We were talking with our director between rounds that a lot of this feels different. Some folks may not be a fan, but today is about an absolute blast. One of my favorite tournaments throughout the course of the year is when new sets come out, right? Sometimes there'd be a tournament like that very first Friday or a week after, or that Pro Tour a few weeks after. And it's fun to see new cards. It's fun to see them. Yeah. It's more fun to see them break them.
Well, they're already kind of broken here in Pioneer, we found, with the appraiser decks and all and what have you. But yeah, standard's always been really exciting. It's how I've pretty much first got into competitive Magic. back in college. It'll be fun to care about Standard again, to have it be part of the competitive ecosystem, to have it be something that you think about, something that you metagame for, something that you brew decks for, maybe even stream with. I really like it, and it's always fresh.
Yes.
Modern is not as fresh and exciting as the modern players might have you believe. It doesn't rotate as often as it could, but yeah, Standard.
Yeah. A part is that a big draw. I've said this for a couple other formats. Whatever Nerd Rage is supporting is most likely something I want to be interested in. Like, attending these events is one of the best parts. Like, I look forward to it. It's an important time. You carve out vacation time. So if Nerd Rage wants me to play Standard, I'm very willing to take a look at it, because being at these events is a capstone for my month.
I think the Pro Tour in Chicago is going to have a big Standard event, maybe like a 75K or something like that.
Massive
That's
tournament.
a huge, big tournament. So I'll be looking forward to playing that bittersweetly, since I won't be on the actual Pro Tour. I'll be there in the side event area. But that sounds like a really, really fun tournament. Maybe it's 100K, I think. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's going to be
Our direct's
huge.
telling us it's huge. And not only is that huge, there's going to be an NRG series event just right before it, right? If you're looking to get that practice in, or like they were saying, a lot of players will travel to certain areas, like be there for an event. You can come out to an NRG event and play against some real titans of Magic.
Yeah.
And it already feels that way.
It'll be fun to see how some of the people that are known as maybe modern specialists or pioneer specialists fare in the battleground of Standard, in the arena of Standard.
And the part that's going to be the most exciting is when you see someone who's a specialist, right? We were talking about Zoe throughout the course of this day, decide to lock in on Boros Convoke and really learn it. And then to see, is that transferable? Can Zoe go to Standard and be like, oh, a lot of these pieces are here too for this part. Can I do this? You're starting to see, once you generate enough buzz for something, people will flock to it and try to figure it out. I'm sure you're going to try to figure out if blue-white control or blue-black or blue-red or whatever. You'll try to figure it out.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see the control players flop around in a shallower card pool where you don't have access to cards like the free elementals or counterspell, or even Teferi Hero of Dominaria to bail you out of sticky situations. You might find these control players playing something else in Standard.
And if I can interest you in a sticky situation, it's this Azorius control deck trying to fight back against Convoke, right? Looks like we're fully resolving these mulligans, figuring out that perfect 6 here for Zoe. Jesse on the play, was taken down in game number 1, but it's definitely a little better than being on the draw against this deck. You're going to have just a few more moments, a few more mana just to try to keep up and punch back against Boros Convoke.
Yeah, we'll see if Jesse's able to replicate some of what Ryan Hayes was able to do against Zoe in Game 2 with the March of Otherworldly Lights and being able to chain off these cheap counter spells. We'll see what's in store.
And Zoe starting with the same 1-drop we started with last game. I'm seeing Thraben Inspector, Wedding Announcement, Resolute Reinforcement. Just a hand ready to just pile things out into play. We started with this last time too. 1 point upstairs, Blood Token incoming. And remember, if we can play another 1-drop, we can use these to activate the ability of the Warden. Thraben Inspector.
All right. Yeah, Zoe's off to a really good start here. And I do see a Get Lost, I think, in her hand.
Yeah, I think Jesse responding before this Inspector is here, or even in response to its trigger, before it's here, to make sure that we don't get to activate this Warden, we don't get to get the Scry. And now when this resolves, it's much less intimidating, right? There's not a 2-3, didn't get to Scry, so perfect timing on that removal spell.
Being able to untap into turn 3, still at 19 life, kind of hopeful.
And, you as our blue-white master, if you had a lockdown, are you trying to slam it here, just clean up a little bit, or are you trying to get as much as you possibly can?
It's tough to say. I think it depends on what the rest of your hand looks like. It's maybe not the answer you were looking for, but it does depend.
It's hard to know, right? Playing against control can be very, very difficult. It's hard to understand how they prioritize things, as they notice Zoe didn't make any plays and they can prioritize getting cards in hand here.
Yeah, this feels like potential Resolute Reinforcement or that 3-drop flash creature.
Yeah, it looks like I think Zoe, she may have her own copy of Get Lost, but I
Yeah.
am seeing those reinforcements. And just this slew of 1/1s. And if Zoe wants, we could use that blood, but now is not the time. We can untap with just a slew of 1-power creatures.
Hey, that'll get the job done.
Right. I mean, chip damage is very real when you play against control. Just trying to get in every point that you possibly can. Zoe's hand is Wedding Announcement, Inspector, Get Lost.
They might be trying to find a window to resolve this wedding announcement. And Zoe's maybe trying to say, hey, can you please just tap out? Can you just take care of these things for me?
Right, because your control opponent's just been holding up mana each and every turn. So it's creating this cat and mouse. I want to play this. Do you have the answer? But the longer you wait, they're going to find the answer.
All right. And we're sacrificing this Omen. Not usually a good sign for control, but no alarms going off quite yet.
And we see a quick 3 mana, and there's the lockdown.
Oh, this is big. Because Zoe has the Get Lost, but I think Jesse also has a counter spell in hand.
Oh, because Temporary Lockdown is an enchantment, right? So this could be answered by that Get Lost out of the sideboard.
So
It's going to take me so long to remember that this can target enchantments. Incredible off Get Lost here. And this can allow us to re-trigger our Enter the Battlefield effects.
Oh, it's going to take all those tokens that Zoe had created with the with the bloods and the clues.
And there's the Get Lost and the Make Disappear.
Ooh.
You're reading this blue-white control play. Like, you know the lines.
Yeah, and I think maybe Zoe could have just tapped out for to use a clue here, but hey, she finally found an opening for this wedding announcement, which is pretty good.
Right, almost kind of trading off that Get Lost, knowing that maybe Jesse does have interaction, just the feel of the game, but you've been holding back that wedding announcement, so now you had a moment to actually sneak it in there.
And we've landed this wedding announcement, but at what cost? I mean, Zoe's low on resources, and Jesse's still at a very comfortable 13.
And I know that's the one-of copy of Get Lost out of the sideboard, none in the main, so that was our answer to Temporary Lockdown, and it's gone.
Yeah, and we're just going to start making samurais here. I think the corner has been turned really early in this game. I think Zoe's got one card in hand.
Wandering Emperor's so cool. I love this, like, flash.
I know you love it. You were playing it in creativity.
Yeah, I mean, people
Modern.
make decisions a lot.
Yeah.
It's just good. Like, there's such power to... I mean, and Wizards has almost admitted this by scaling back the number of walkers. There's a lot of power to be found in a Planeswalker, and it being in flash speed, and then followed up by an Angel.
Lifelink onto the Samurai, and now we've got our own little flying Angel. I think, yeah, this was a really good draw out of Jesse.
Right, it allows us to get this flying first strike lifelink on the Samurai for this turn. Just getting a life buff can be so important against the aggression Zoe might cobble together, but right now, very little to fight back with. And Zoe scoops it up. They see it immediately. Zoe sees that she's beat this game. We need to go to a game number 3. I can't wait to be on the play.
Yeah, I think
that was the power of being on the play. Like, allows that control deck to have just that moment of reprieve. We saw, I asked you, turn 3, is this the lockdown turn? Turns out it was turn 4.
Yeah, being able to hit all your land drops naturally went along. Well, you know, sort of naturally. You did have the Omen, and you were able to sacrifice the Omen, but not being forced to spend mana to interact with Zoe's kind of maybe slower start. You know, you were able to get the march early, and you were able to spend mana on an Omen until you were able to just go comfortably into turn 5, where you had board wipe plus interaction. Did
we see a Convoke creature out of Zoe that game?
No, and I think that made a huge difference.
Right. It's like my old adage that if there's something in the name of the deck, it's usually important to how the deck functions. It helps with sideboarding. It helps with playing the game. Helps with understanding patterns. So if we're playing Boros Convoke, I'm looking to Convoke, and that may have been a big part of it. We've seen the power of the Convoke creatures, both surviving lockdown as being big creatures. I'm sure those are important for this game number 3.
And I think Zoe had mulligan perhaps to 6, but it was a fine hand. It had a couple of 1-drops. It had a Thraben Inspector. It had some blood token generators. It had a Get Lost as insurance against a lockdown. So there was some staying power there. Missing the 5-drop maybe
Right.
is what would have made the difference there, but we'll find out here in game 3.
Yeah, there's also kind of like a draw to when your sideboard card is in your opening hand. You're like, oh, well, this
Yeah.
is why I brought this in. This feels great to me. That I know sometimes for me has like clouded my decision making. I'm like, oh, well, I brought this in for this matchup, so that must mean that this hand can be good as well. And I'm not saying that's how Zoe felt. That's how I feel. If I'm looking at a hand that has that pivotal sideboard card, especially when it's just a one of, I know this is my one shot at it.
Yeah, it's really difficult to mulligan lands plus spells, especially if you've already mulliganed once. At a certain point, you have to exercise the discipline and say, well, I'm going to work with what cards I've got.
It's hard because it's like kind of a meme like phrase that Magic players would say back and forth. It's like, well, it's got lands and spells, but also that's just true sometimes. Yeah. You need both of those to play Magic, it turns out.
Yeah, and it just so happened that Jesse's spells were a little bit more overpowering that game. But here I think Jesse's going to really hope for maybe a top 95 percentile draw. You're going to want like a turn 1 March. You're going to want a turn 2 counterspell. You're going to want the turn 3 lockdown. And I think if you don't necessarily have those, you might just send back a 7 and a 6.
Right. You're on the hunt for something so important, made even more difficult by playing the 80 card Yorion deck, right? That we've seen the back and forth. We saw 4 different versions of blue-white control. We saw the Kahira version, which we saw in our top 8. We've seen this Yorion version. We've seen the Lotus version. We've seen just a classic 60. And it seems like it's difficult, even among all the blue-white control players, to figure out which one's the right one. But in this moment, in this matchup, I'm very worried to have 80 cards to try to find my important pieces.
Yeah, it's a big downside to the deck, but you got to make your deck building decisions. And hey, it brought Jesse this far into the tournament.
Oh, absolutely.
So definitely a good choice. And I'm very partial to the Yorion decks myself. I would say it's really hard to cut it down to 60.
Is that because there's just so many good cards that you're looking to play, or is there something bigger to why someone would choose a Yorion deck?
I mean, it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, right? Like we've discussed already, you have more staying power in the grinding matchups, like against Rakdos, against Mirrors, against other slower, dirtier decks, because you've got the Yorions, you've got the Omens, you've got a lot more to it. But
like what kind of opening hands? Like if you're playing against Convoke, right? You said you're looking for a March, a lockdown.
If you're playing against Convoke, or if you know you're going to be playing against Convoke, I would have brought 60. But definitely, like I mentioned, you want a March, you want a 2-mana interaction spell, you want an untapped white source, specifically like a Hallowed Fountain or one of the pathways, right? Because you want to be able to march in response to a Gleeful Demolition.
That's the big moment
too. Because if you can stop Zoe from having an early 5-drop on turn 2 or on turn 3, that's going to give you a lot of time to get into turn 3, turn 4, turn 5. So you want a March, a 2-mana interaction spell, a lockdown, or even a verdict. Maybe you can swing that if you have enough time. But you're going to want like Memory Deluge, you don't really want to see. Even Wandering Emperor is a little slow. You don't necessarily want to see that. Omen is a trap. I think if you keep it in your opening hand on the back of an Omen, I'll find what I'm looking for. Hey, 2 cards out of 73,
right?
You're probably not going to find what you're looking for.
And especially on the draw, you can imagine like Zoe might already be just applying a mass amount of force when you play an Omen.
Yeah, you want to find some very specific cards, and I don't think it's the card quantity that's going to win you the game here. It isn't a Rakdos matchup. It isn't a blue-white mirror matchup. You're not going to want, I need a critical mass of cards. Zoe's going to come out blazing, and you're going to have to match the speed. And so if you go down to 5 cards or even 4 cards, you might very well have to do that, because just having even an Angel in your hand, in your opening hand, that's 5 mana. You need to get to turn 5 first before you're even thinking about casting these 5 mana spells. And for Zoe, I think you want one of the 5 drops at least. You don't want what happened in game 2. You don't want to just like, sputter out and run out of steam there. We'll see what they kept.
Right. As we see Zoe seems to be going down to 5 here. And I'm sorry, Jesse, is Zoe keeping this 6? You kind of started the beginning of the phrase, but I wanted to finish it. It's not about the quantity of cards, but this is a matchup truly about the quality of those cards, right?
Yep. And that's the problem of, with 80, it's not huge, right? It's not like you're playing 60 versus 120 cards.
Right.
It's 20 extra cards, which is a big difference, and some of them are redundant, right? Instead of playing maybe 3 marches, you're playing 4. Instead of playing maybe 3 get lost, you're playing 4. So the ratios kind of line up a lot of the time, but it's still like with 80 cards, you have more variance. Your deck is a little bit bigger. The odds of your cards being on the bottom of your deck, it's a little bit further of the way down than it is if it was only 60 cards.
And I mean, Jesse went to your school of thought, right? Going down to, it looks like what they seem to have keepable 5 for Jesse. She's debating over these cards, looking for that perfect setup of quality cards to fight back, because there may not be that many turns of this game. If you can get through those early turns, you'll find more cards to figure out later, but you got to get through them.
Yeah, and it's possible that Zoe maybe kept a little bit of a slower hand, so it's difficult to make well-good decisions. Say, I'm going to go down to 4. This isn't good enough. Sometimes you have to just say, this is what I've got. I'm going to play my best and also hope for the best.
Here's this turn 1 Thraben Inspector, and I believe I saw in Zoe's hand that Gleeful Demolition. So Zoe may be having, this is a script that I want, but Jesse with tapped castle. You said we're looking for early white sources, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. You want like a Hallowed Fountain or a Pathway to be able to march here, but if you don't have it, you don't have it.
Right. So Zoe may possibly be able to unimpeded get through, play this Gleeful Demolition, blow up this clue, make 3 1/1s. Importantly, we attacked with this Inspector, so I'm not thinking there's the 5-drop piece. And we have a tapped Foundry and send it back. A slight sigh of relief if you're Jesse, but still the onslaught's coming.
Maybe a bit of an eyebrow raiser too. You're wondering, was there not a 2-drop to play there? Was there what else is going on there on Zoe's side of the field? You got to be thinking about maybe a wedding announcement, but no 5-drop, I guess.
Right. It's interesting to think about. We keep harping on the importance of finding those 5-drop Convoke cards, but also you don't want to mulligan too far against a controlling strategy, because every card can be important. We're talking about this quality of your cards. And if we have this like ramp up into an important 3-drop, or even just continue to apply this pressure, that could still be worth it.
It looks like Zoe's got a Resolute Reinforcements, which she may leave up here, and Jesse might be hoping to cash in a counterspell, untap, and play a lockdown to buy a ton of time. But Zoe might be able to very well play around that by leaving up some flash threats.
Right, in the form of at least that Resolute Reinforcement you're talking about.
Right, exactly.
And this is the speed of this Boros Convoke deck. Zoe is on her third turn, rumbling in here for 4, but also deep in the tank, already trying to figure out how to maneuver around this, and it's just their turn 3.
And we're going to play out this Epicure. I think there was a Gleeful Demolition in hand. I don't think Zoe's going to cast it.
I see that Resolute. I see an Imodane's Recruiter and the Resolute Reinforcement we know about. So we might be trying to end the game this coming turn with an end step reinforcement, untap Recruiter, kill you. And it's basically scripted. These are the 2 cards that Zoe has left to work with.
Yep. No Absorb mana, although I don't remember if Jesse was even playing Absorb in the deck.
Jesse is looking at Make Disappears, Jwari Disruption, Dovin's Veto, Change the Equations, and a Rewind if we get to 4.
That Rewind's probably not in the deck right now.
Right. You said we could rip that one up and toss it away.
Just toss it. Don't put it back in.
So Zoe, drawn up, has this Recruiter, but the question is does Jesse have Jwari Disruption? Do they have Make Disappear? Did they bring in a Mystical Dispute just to get cards out of their deck? But here's the Recruiter.
Follow-up question, would that even be enough?
Right. And
because
here's the big Recruiter.
Oh, God.
Combat, we're getting in there. It's time to count it up. Asking life total, checking hand. That's the handshake. Boros Convoke aggressively just getting in there. It's so hard when you play in the Battle of Friends, but Zoe Riederman taking it down in 3 games here with this powerful Boros Convoke deck. And a part of what we were talking about earlier is the Appraiser deck is the new hotness of like the big combo.
Yep.
This Boros Convoke deck was Hogak a few weeks ago.
It was. I remember at the first RC Dallas when it first came on the scene, people were really using some superlatives to describe it. But yeah, I mean, it's still a really, really strong deck, and it's continuing to get more tools.
So everyone buckle up real quick, get yourself a glass of water. We're going to step out just to get a quick moment between these games, but the finals will be coming at you in just a few moments here. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.